Meanwhile, the culture of Web3 and blockchain is one of the most elitist cultures I've ever seen, where either you are in the know or you're not in the know. And if you're not, then you're worthless. And in the know means knowledgeable about very complex technology.
Welcome back to Brave UX for part 2 of our conversation with the insightful Tamara Adlin. In the first part, we explored Tamara's innovative approach to user personas and discussed the challenges of executive misalignment. If you missed it, be sure to check out the previous episode for those valuable insights. In this segment, we're about to explore even more thought-provoking topics. We'll delve into the intriguing intersection of UX, innovation, and data, and how Tamara's perspective on using basic UX principles can make a big impact in various industries. Tamara will share her insights on how to balance human connection with data-driven decisions and discuss her impactful work with the Never Search Alone initiative. If you enjoyed part 1, you are in for a treat as we dive deeper into the nuances of UX and beyond. Let's pick up where we left off. You spoke about innovation, and obviously we've spoken a little bit about tornado chaos here.
Chaos.
I want to turn our to some tornado chaos, perhaps that happened in around about 2017, and that's when you became involved in the world of the Web3 startup, which you've characterized as, and I'll quote you now, being dragged kicking and screaming into an actually pretty magical world. What made you reluctant at first to get involved?
Well, at first it was being intimidated by the technology, right? Because, this was another Ken Seif thing. Ken Seif was alive and kicking, and believe me, alive and kicking. Serial entrepreneur in e-commerce and over the years, and then started this fund in e-commerce and retail, and then started this fund in blockchain, and called me one day and said, "Oh, you got to get involved in this, and I want you to help these companies." And I was like, "This is complicated." I was like, "I don't wanna." It's another, and I think a lot of us have felt that way. A lot of us are feeling that way about AI over and over and over again. We go through this. I don't wanna, and then we find out all these arguments for why we don't gotta. Well, I didn't wanna. Started learning about it a little bit. Started trying to help some of these super early stage blockchain and Web3 companies. Then I didn't wanna because they were not, and many still are not, ready for us. Just like AI, most, I would say, of the teams trying to innovate in this are not ready for our discipline. They may say they are, but they're not.
You got knocked off your confidence. I think those were the words that you used.
Oh my God.
Pretty hard. I think you framed it as sort of an 18-month confidence knock. What exactly, it sounded like maybe you were caught by surprise. Tell me about that. What went on there?
Well, I went from worlds in which I would walk into the room and say the sky is blue, and people would say, "Thank God you're here," or saying the buy button needs to be above the fold, and that's genius, or whatever. And then I went into these rooms where they were telling me that I was frustrating them because I was asking them to slow down a little bit. And then the sexism and ageism started to come into play. And I was, basically told, well, you just don't understand the technology, right? In ways that were very clearly interestingly, the world of Web3 and blockchain is supposed to be a great equalizer. It is supposed to bring control and ownership and power to individuals rather than institutions. Meanwhile, the culture of Web3 and blockchain is one of the most elitist cultures I've ever seen, where either you are in the know or you're not in the know. And if you're not, then you're worthless. And in the know means knowledgeable about very complex technology that's very hard to use. That really threw me off because I've been through many, many, many iterations of different technologies for years. It doesn't matter. But now all of a sudden it mattered. And that freaked me out. And let me get you something more concrete. At one point, I told the team, right after I literally had shown them value that they said, "Oh my God, this was valuable." I then told them, "Can you at least get the logic of the system literally saying like, what are the nouns and what are the verbs down on paper before you build it. And they said, you don't understand the technology. That's not the way we do things in blockchain. And I'm like, I literally don't know what to tell. I don't know how to respond to that. Like, you don't want to get the logic of whatever you're building down on paper before, or paper, whatever. And they don't know, you're frustrating us. And I did not take it well, which is important to admit. I mean, I didn't think anything could knock me off my high horse. Professionally, I'm a super confident person. I'd heard it all, I thought. Nope.
I think one of the more surreal things you were told in that period was you had to talk someone or try and talk someone back down from the cliff of just copying the UI of Google Drive.
Oh my God, yeah, this is a really good one. Yeah.
How did that conversation go? Were you successful? Did you manage to get them back from that edge?
I mean, no. So the thing was that they were doing these things called smart contracts, which are documents, but they have code within them. It's like, you know, there's a piece of, imagine a contract, but it's checking against code to make sure that it, and in this piece is checking different code than this piece, and it's whatever. So it's applications within documents. And they said, well, you're really bothering us. You're slowing us down. We're just going to copy the UI of Google Drive. And I'm like, first of all, Jared Spool has an excellent joke, which is that Google makes it easy to find anything unless it's stored in Google Drive, which I think might be the funniest thing ever said. And also, you can't do that. You have applications within documents. And Google Drive was made for sharing and they literally said to me, "We'll just put a button here." And I was like, I literally don't know what to say about this. And there was nothing I could do. That's letting it break, baby. I was like, I can't help you. You don't want me to help you.
On the flip side of this, right, of the unhelpable, you've also previously said, and I'll quote you again now, you've said, arguing the tech doesn't matter, our skills apply to everything, as in our skills as UXers apply to everything, may be true, but it's currently not helpful. So what have you found, because you're still involved in this space, right? So what have you found has been a more helpful conversation to have with Web3 founders?
It's when you talk to them. So I wrote a little article about pre-disastered founders. And this has to do with assumptions too. The assumptions that Web3 founders have are that they're on the right track and that people are throwing money at their faces. At least this was true a couple of years ago. And I think that the assumptions are, if we're giving loads of cash, venture capitalists, grown-ups, are giving us loads of cash to redesign things like the way money works, then we can redesign everything. We can redesign the software design and development process. There's no reason to look at anything old or established because we're about reinventing everything. You cannot change that perception unless and until they fail, which is just a bigger version of this embedded assumptions in leadership. I tried and I learned my own lesson all over again, which is their strongly held assumptions. And the data that they have, people gave me millions of dollars saying I could do this, is all the evidence that they need. Once they have failed, once something has not gone as well as it, once they realize they need traction, once they realize they need conversion and they have no idea how to get it, that's when the moment for us is there. So I think to keep from getting exhausted, we have to choose our moments.
And choose your clients by the sound of it as well.
Absolutely. Because really, I was shocked. And I'm sharing this because I think sharing vulnerability is critically important, especially as we get more senior in our field. I didn't think this could happen to me. I didn't think anything could, but it did. And it was such a lesson and such a shock. And I think a lot of people are having this lesson and shock just with the way Techmageddon is happening right now with the employment in tech, that they never thought they would be seen as irrelevant. And suddenly they are. And knowing that you're not alone is really helpful.
And also not irrelevant. I think it's easy to buy into that narrative. And by the sounds of it, you regained your confidence in this particular space. You didn't stay down in the doldrums wondering whether or not you could actually add any value here, did you?
Well, no, I did for quite a long time, actually. I mean, I had and I'm still trying to figure out what I want to be when I grow up, and I'm still reinventing my practice because it turns out startups don't have money. So working with a lot of startups isn't necessarily the best way to make a living. But certainly, yes, the confidence came back and sort of this external perspective of what was really going on here and how it had nothing to do with me or my abilities. But that the responsibility then became on me to reframe my value. And not just say, you should trust me because of all these things I've done in my past, but being able to say, I can see and actually predict this, that, and this problem. Is that what you're facing? If that's true, then here's how I can specifically help you get past that.
You spoke about value there, and it's just interesting, just a side note, that it seems like maybe it's founders more broadly, but definitely what you were describing there with Web3 founders, how they conflate funding with value.
Oh, yes.
Funding is the opportunity to prove value, but somehow those wires get crossed and they think that they've made it when really they've just received other people's money to provide
If somebody
the opportunity
gave you $5
to make
million,
it.
wouldn't you feel like you had succeeded?
Well, see, now that's a tricky question, because do I agree and show some humility, or do I take a step back and give you an honest answer? I honestly think, just given my own relationship with money, that I would treat that as not something that I had earned yet, given the way that I deal with money, in particular my clients' money. So maybe I'm not the best person to ask that of. Who knows? If someone did turn around and give me $5 million, throw all that high talk out, maybe I'd think that I, was a super legend. I'm not sure.
So let me ask you a more specific follow-up question. If you had an idea for a new kind of mouse, and someone gave you $5 million because they want you to build that kind of mouse, and somebody came in with a bunch of data that said you should make this kind of mouse instead, would you change your plan? See, that's where, I don't know, you don't have to answer that, but
it's
that's
a tricky one. But hypothetically, I can see what you're getting at, especially considering if the profile of these founders, you talk about pre-disaster founders, which has a pretty funny origin, which maybe we'll get to. But the people that have sort of been around the traps a few times, they've, probably in their 30s or 40s or even 50s. But I get the sense that a lot of the Web3 founders are more in that like 20s, maybe early 30s bracket. And I can totally understand how you could have the blinkers on at that level of perspective that you have at that age.
I think there's another element here too, which is the element of how people look at innovation and invention, and how that actually isn't compatible with data. So one of the things I think is that data is always looking at the past. It just is. It's looking at what happened before, right? Even AI. So I had a funny experience where I'm trying to create an image for my social channels that are the name of which are going to be corporate underpants, which is a phrase I started using in 2006. Asking AI to put underpants on a skyscraper is something it has a really big problem doing. I actually took that as great news, because that means it's never seen that before. It's never seen anything like that before. So that's just a really weird and funny, and by the way, the images are turning out really well, thanks to a friend of mine who's helping me. Innovation is in many ways seen as antithetical to data, partially because we revere Steve Jobs and frickin' you-know-who and, Jeff Bezos as doing things that had nothing to do with data about the way things had been done before.
But that's a fallacy, right? Like, the more you dig into that, I had a conversation on the podcast a couple of years ago with the wonderful Bob Baxley, and he gave me some insight into, while Apple might not do traditional user research, all of the people that Apple employs, the profile of the people that it makes its products for. And there are initiatives within Apple, at least when Bob was there, where they were very keenly looking at how people were experiencing the devices. So it's almost like there's an intentional obfuscation of truth when it comes to certain companies' stories that they enjoy perpetuated out there in these kind of forums, right? Like, it's not the whole truth, at least, is what people commonly believe.
Yeah, and I think to your point, just building on that, if I'm arguing that crystal clear focus and mega alignment is critical for creating great products, the way alignment happens, there's ultra alignment in those companies because it's one person. You're building for Jeff, you're building for Steve Jobs, it's ultra aligned. Maybe by force, but I think it just sort of serves the same point, right?
Yeah, people buy that, though. They buy into that when they go to work at Amazon, or if they were working with Steve, it was a known quantity. You knew what you were getting yourself in for.
Yeah, and there's another sort of thing that I tell people about the Jeff meetings that is related to fighting against stuff that you can't fight against. Whenever you went into a Jeff meeting with a design, first you showed it to him the way he wanted to see it. Only then did you show alternatives. Because if somebody has something in their mind, like, for example, who the user of a product is or the features that they want or whatever, like assumptions of executives, first you have to show them what they want. Otherwise, it colors everything and they're going to say no. And that's sort of, we sort of think, no, we want to show them the data-driven way first, the right way first. Nope, do not do that. If they told you to show it to them one way and it's dumb, first you show it to the way they wanted it. Then and only then might they be interested.
That's really interesting. It's making me remember a conversation I had with Amy Jimenez Marquez. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Amy, but she was at at Amazon at some point, possibly after you were there, and she was working on the voice team for Alexa. I don't think she was part of
way after me, yeah.
Yeah, right. So I don't think she was part of the original voice team, but very soon after. And I believe she was telling me a story about how Jeff's original idea for Alexa was that it would be based on the computer for the Enterprise in Star Trek. And I think maybe even the early voice was kind of leaning that way. And then, of course, it kind of somehow it ended up being a little bit more consumer friendly and a little less niche and geek there. But I can almost see what you're saying there with the presentations to Jeff, that initially maybe the voice was very much like the Enterprise's computer, and only later, after people were able to demonstrate an alternative, did it change. Now, that's all hearsay.
Picture that. If he's sitting there excited to hear the voice from the Enterprise, any other voice, he's just going to say, where's my voice?
Yeah. It's a childhood dream being realized in that moment. Yeah. And this comes back to some things you've said previously, and I think other guests have echoed, and certainly I believe this too, which is that we are in danger many times of forgetting who our users are, our internal users of the work that we do. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think we're also in danger of fighting things that we shouldn't fight. Instead, we should do the whole trees bend with the wind. And if we lean into assumptions, if we respect them enough, we respect their existence. It doesn't mean you have to like them, but you have to respect that they exist. You have to respect how powerful they are. You have to respect that there is plenty of quote unquote data in the heads of stakeholders supporting their assumptions. And until you know what they are, and until they all see for themselves that they're not the same, and until they have a different way of talking about it, like by talking about Ian and Trey instead of whatever else, they have a new vocabulary, they're not going to get past them. They're not going to see them. They're not going to. So you help them. And then you have a chance for all of our wonderful stuff that we do on the construction site to get better and better, because you've mitigated the tornado risk.
100%. Just coming back to, before we wrap things up, briefly to the Web3 founders side of things, how are the movie The World According to Garp and Web3 related? So
this shows my age too. The World According to Garp was a Robin Williams movie based on a really awesome book. And so in this movie, Garp, which is the name of the male protagonist, and his new wife are out looking for a house. And they are looking at a house with a real estate agent. They're standing outside. It's a gorgeous house. And you hear this plane coming in the distance. And it's puttering, and it crashes into the side of the house. And everybody takes cover. And then the pilot shows up from the second story in the huge hole in the house, waving down, saying, "Everybody all right?" And Garp stands up and says, "We'll take it." And his wife says, "Are you crazy?" And he said, "No. What are the chances? It's pre-disastered. What are the chances this is going to happen again?" And that's what I like to think about, that whole idea about when you talk to founders. And if they have been through a process where they have done everything just the way they thought it should be done, and it didn't work, that's when they're interested in other people who have been through it before and know some better ways to get around those problems. It's timing. It's understanding the very human qualities, not necessarily thinking that they're all sociopaths necessarily, and Tom wasn't saying that, but just really stopping and really thinking about, what is it like to be an executive? It's not what we think it is.
And it sounds like, as far as people coming from our world of UX who might be interested getting involved with Web3 projects, that finding founders that are pre-disastered is possibly a good starting point for places that may be more receptive to the type of expertise that we bring.
Yeah, or, the other approach that I have taken in the past, and I'm not as heavily into Web3 right now. I just want to do stuff that people want to do, wherever that is. But like my approach was I did a couple presentations at conferences on really basic fundamental UX stuff that could be useful to Web3 people, whether or not they did it right. Just some really basic ideas. And I think we have to make ourselves usable. We have to make our knowledge usable. We have to get off of our high horses. I was pushed off of mine, but other people have a different opportunity. And stop whining. We've been whining since the late 90s about everything. And we can't do that anymore. We still will, but I think figuring out how to continue to make ourselves and our ideas more usable, even if it means that only a small percentage of what we know gets used. And it's annoying. God, is it annoying? That's just where I've ended up.
Yep. We just have to let some things go, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Speaking of letting some things go, I better let you go soon. So my final question today, Tamara, is to do with your volunteering at Never Search Alone. So just to recap for people, it's a community that aims to help job seekers find good jobs.
Yep.
And I saw your last post, I think it was a video post, or one of your last posts on LinkedIn, where you were looking at a session for job advice for those people that are seeking in the over 50 years old category. And as we've talked about a little earlier today, the UX job market's a bit upside down right now. And there are a number of very senior and very talented practitioners and design leaders that I know of personally that have been finding it very challenging to navigate. And I was curious to understand from you, maybe it's your own personal story or insight or something that story of someone else that you've been told or heard recently. What's the best job seeking advice you've heard lately for people that are in that over 50 age bracket?
Yeah. Okay, well, first of all, just for context, Never Search Alone is a book. It's written by a dear friend of mine named Phil Terry. All the information about it is at phyl.org. That's Phil with a Y. And the reason that I'm willing to put my energy, my volunteer time, my reputation behind it is because it's not a scam. You buy the book or you get it from a library, every other thing is completely free. It is not. And it's about creating these little job search councils where you go through this process that's in this book to think through who you are today and what you want and how best to get that job. It's sort of like a career coach that you provide for each other for free. You asked me what the best advice is for people over 50. The one that's really sticking with me right now is when you think about your own elevator pitch, I think most of us think, well, we've got to get as much of our resume into 2 minutes as we possibly can. But if you turn yourself around and look at yourself as the recipient of that, if somebody got in an elevator with you and spewed their resume, your eyes would glaze over. You got to look at yourself as the user of this stuff too. Nobody wants to hear that, and yet we all think it's the right thing to do. When you go out there to say you're looking for a job, you'll say, I'll take anything in product, because of course you think I'll take anything. Reading that, you don't know who to introduce that person to. So instead, getting more specific and creating versions of our experience that aren't about our experience, it's about the particular problem we can solve for a particular type of role in a particular type of company, as Phil calls it, the candidate market fit statement. And there's data involved in there too. But the more specific you can be about what you're looking for and the benefit you bring, the business value of you as a product, the better off you'll be. And I think those of us of a certain age, I'm 55, almost 56, I still think like I have to get as many, like, oh, I have to say Amazon, I have to say Zillow, I have to say Microsoft, I have to say Web3. Nobody wants to hear that. But if I can say, you know what, I can really help. If there's some kind of problem with your product and you're not quite sure what it is or how to fix it, I'm the person to call. And even that's not really good enough, but.
I get where you're going. Yep, that's the hook. That's the thing that's tied into the immediate need. And it
it's
sounds like
about them. It's about them. It's not about you.
It sounds like that advice actually might be applicable to anyone in any age group.
Absolutely. It's so much less frantic also than the other ways of like trying to mini resume people, like forcibly mini resume them. Nobody's going to remember that anyway. And it sucks to listen to. You have to be like, oh, sounds very impressive.
This ties back into what you've been saying all through the conversation, which is data doesn't work. And delivering a resume in that way is just a data dump. And what you're really looking for are those moments of human connection or things that humans respond to, whether it's meeting someone's expectation with the sound of Alexa in terms of Jeff, or whether it's just understanding what people are currently struggling with and tailoring your message and telling a story around that. Like, that's the stuff that gets the synapses firing and people paying attention.
Data doesn't work the way it should at the times we think it should. But if we put it at the right time in the right context, then we give it much more power. So anybody who would respond negatively to me saying data doesn't work, I would ask you to think about, what are the biggest battles you're fighting? And look carefully at those. And the things that make you angry about that statement, there's ways around that. And sometimes you have to let it break, and then you look for other doorways in.
What a great place to end our conversation. Tamara, thank you. This has been a hugely valuable and salient conversation. Really appreciate all the stories and insights that you've shared with me today.
What a huge honor to be part of this podcast with all the amazing people you had, and you just do such a wonderful job. So thank you, Brendan.
Oh, you're most welcome. Definitely my pleasure, Tamara. And for people who want to connect with you, there's been many great things you've shared today, and I'm sure people are wondering, how do I find out more, learn more, get in contact? What's the best way for them to do that?
Well, probably following me on LinkedIn. I'm the only Tamara Adlin on LinkedIn. My website is on there too, and send me messages saying, get off your ass and create that course. That would be the most helpful thing to me, because I'm working on it, but oh my God. Anyway, I'd love that. And anybody interested in the alignment persona process, it's something that I'm looking for beta testers for the course and all of that good stuff. So get in touch. I'd love to hear from you.
Great. Thanks, Tamara. And to everyone who's tuned in, it's been great having you here as well. Everything that we've covered, as usual, will be in the show notes, including where you can find Tamara, and everything that we've spoken about will be fully chaptered. If you've enjoyed the show and you want to hear more great conversations like this with world-class leaders in UX research, product management, and of course, design, don't forget to leave a review, subscribe to the podcast. It'll turn up every 2 weeks for you, and tell one other person if you feel that they would get value from these conversations at depth. If you want to reach out to me, you can find me also on LinkedIn. There's a link to my profile at the bottom of the show notes, or head on over to my website, which is thespaceinbetween.co.nz. That's thespaceinbetween.co.nz. And until next time, keep being brave.